Vyogya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Tat Sat. So we were at the shloka number 33, and I'll just share the page with you. You see, what we are discussing right now is a kind of a dialogue between the Vedantins and the Buddhists. There is a deeply dialectical dialogue going on intellectually between different schools of thought in India. There was one debate, one dialogue, essentially, which is sort of not rejecting each other, but trying to find weaknesses or challenging each other. Two views. One is the Nyayikas and the other one is Buddhists. So the Nyayikas challenged the Buddhists regarding absence of God because Nyayikas trusted, believed in God. They were theists. And they thought that these Buddhists were atheists because they didn't talk about God at all. So when Udayanacharya, the great author and scholar from Mithila, once went to Jagannath Puri, and the Pandas kind of didn't give him the kind of respect that he thought he deserved, he kind of made fun of Jagannath. He said, "Do you know your seat is in doubt, and the Buddhists have been challenging it, and I'm doing the best to protect your seat. And your servants here, these Pandas, they don't know how to respect me." And they understood. They heard these words and they respected him and they took him to the king. And that's a very interesting story. So that is one dialogue which is going on all the time between the Nyayikas and the Buddhists, which is nicely captured by the great Bengali scholar who taught for a long time in Cambridge, Bimal B.K. Matilal. He captured this dialogue at great length. The other dialogue which was going on was between Sankaracharya in his followers and the Buddhists. Interestingly, Sankaracharya and his followers were not speaking in the same language as the Nyayikas. They had some difference with the Buddhists, but they did accept a lot of arguments of the Buddhists. Like the Nyayikas accepted the phenomenal reality as absolutely real. They believed in what in modern philosophy is called correspondence theory of truth. So you have a truth proposition. So I'll say there is a particular object on my palm. So this is the reality. This is the statement. If there's a correspondence, so whatever truth statement you're making, it has to have a corresponding reality. And the Nyayikas thought that with their logic and their pramanas, their epistemological robust arguments, they could establish what is real, what is unreal. The Vedantists, however, accepted that there are two levels of realities, and Vedantists, in fact, talked about three realities. One is phenomenal, another is delusional, and there is one which is paramarthika or nominal or absolute. So the Brahman belongs to the category of the absolute reality. In between is the Vyavaharika Sat or the phenomenal reality. And at the bottom is what you see in case of faulty cognition. If you by mistake see a pole as a human being, that is a faulty perception. Similarly, in the dream world, we see all kinds of things. There is experience of reality, but that is not real. So that's called pratibhasika or an apparent reality. So there are three words: apparent, phenomenal, nominal, or absolute in Vedanta. I'm being a little liberal with language. I'm not strictly using what is approved in the Indian. I'm using nomina, which is purely a Western category. But I would say that broadly you would be able to make sense of it. Now, this dialogue that we were discussing is that there is a dialogue between the Buddhists and the Advaita Vedantists, and where they agree and where they don't agree. So yesterday we were in the last class, we were discussing that he's saying that these Buddhists are a little foolish and they do not know how to respectfully connect with, accept, and engage with the truths of the Shruti Vakyas or our Upanishadic insights. Anaditya Shrutim Morhyad Ime Bodhas Tamasvinaha. These are people kind of blinded by their own argumentative nature and because of their disrespect towards the insightful statements available in the Upanishads. The solutions are already there. These people do not have any respect for these insights. Therefore, apadire niratmatvam, anatta, non-self theory, they said. Swabhavataha, nothing exists. There is a Panchaskanda, they will say that this is an interdependent cobweb which is appearing as real. Per se, there is nothing there. Nirattatvam anumanika sakshushaha. And then there is another aspect to it. We have already discussed it, so I'm not going to revisit. I'm just mentioning it. Anumanika chakshusha means we have this in epistemology. We have 6 pramanas. There are 6 methods of ascertaining what is true. One is called pratyaksha pramana, or what is called perceptual knowledge through your sense organs. Second one is inferential or anumanika, where you use logic or syllogisms. You have a premise and you deduce something. Or you study deductive and inductive logic, all kinds of things. So we had our own logical tradition, where the premise relies on sense perception. So you are trying to say that uh, because you don't have any animal who walk on their 2 legs, humans are different from animals because humans walk on 2 legs, other animals don't. Something like that you want to argue. If you want to argue like this, there would be one statement where the premise relies on sense perception. Similarly, you are saying that this mountain is full of fire. Why so? Because I see smoke, dhumat. And so, what is the concomitance that we establish? Yatra yatra dhrumaha tatra tatra banhi. Yatha mahanase. I have seen that in the kitchen. Wherever there is smoke, generally there is fire. Without fire, there cannot be any smoke. That is how you try to have 5 steps, Panchabhuta. So you have these 5 steps and you prove certain things to be, you have that vyapti jnana, concomitance. If X is there, Y has to be there. That kind of a relationship you are establishing. Now, these bodhas do not accept. There are 4 schools of you have the Sarvastivadins. Sarvastivadins accept external reality, and they are mostly Abhidharma tradition of Sri Lanka. There are 2 categories there. I'm not getting, digressing into Buddhism too much, just giving you a hint about it. One school is what is called Vaibhasika. The commentaries on the sutras, and the other one is Sautantrika. They directly go into the sutras. There are these 2 schools. And then there is the Yogachara or the idealist school, that everything is consciousness. Yogachara, then Vijnanavada. There is something called Kshanika Vijnanavada. The kind of, that is one category of people, they say Vainasikas. There's nothing which is permanent. Everything is born and dead at the same time. A lot of scientists will be happy to accept this because if you look at our cells, they're undergoing constant changes. Heraclitus said that you cannot jump into the same river twice because new water is flowing there. So there are certain philosophical insights even in non-Indian traditions. Of course, some people believe that the early Greek philosophers were perhaps influenced by early Indian philosophers, but then that's another debate. Now, coming back here, the Buddhists try to say that everything undergoes some changes, and then the ultimate view is of the Sunyavadis, who believed everything is vacuous. Then what about what I see, what I experience? Now, these are only appearances of what? Now, per se, nothing exists. See, the difference is they're using the word sunya. Anatta. Anatta means anatma. So there is a fight between the Vedantis and them. And the Buddhists have actually explained it later on. And Basubandhu and others have kind of come out with solutions which are very much acceptable to the Vedantis. They are saying we are not saying nothing means nothing. By nothing, we means a kind of a middle reality which is beyond what is and what is not. They talk about a word called Buddha nature. They're talking about some kind of a superlative reality. So, in a way, there are no fundamental issues which distinguish the Vedantists and the Buddhists, except that the Buddhists do not pay any attention to the insights of the Upanishads, even though what they argue, what they say, have clear influence. They have, there's evidence to believe that they have any allegiance to the Upanishads. So they become Nastikas. And these Advaita Vedantins remain Astikas in a certain sense because they accept the testimony of the scriptures. That is what distinguishes them. Now let's come to the intellectual fight, which is very subtle. The basic fundamental difference is that the Advaita Vedantis and the Buddhists both accept phenomenal reality is not per se real, it is an appearance. So, in that sense, the Buddhists and the Madhyamika followers, are close cousins. They are cousin brothers. What they call Shunya, we call Purna. What we call Brahman, they call Shunya. That is the basic difference. It's a difference in language and some elaboration of argumentation. The most important being that the Buddhists, for example, will not in any manner make any room for the insights of the Upanishads to be an authority on their shoulders. They will not accept it. That is the fundamental difference. So now he's saying that they are sorely against the Upanishads and they are only dependent on logical elaborations. Anumanika chakshushaha. So that is how we have done it. And then there is a bit of argumentation the Vedanti makes against the Buddhists, saying, Shunyam asit iti brushe sad yogamba sadatpatam shunyasya natu tad yuktam ubhayam vyahatattvataha. So he's saying, when you say Shunyam asit, nothing existed. We have already discussed it in the last class. Shunyam asit, nothing existed. Nothing means it's abhavaatmaka, absence of anything, right? That is Shunya. Then you are saying asit. Asit refers to a reality of existence, right? There was a boy, there was a girl, there was a dog, there was a cat. When I make these statements, when I'm referring to this aspect of was, there was, it's a reality of existence. It's referring to one aspect of existence. And then I'm saying there was dog was, cat was, yeah, fine. There's no problem. There's no contradiction. But if I say nothing was, what do you mean by nothing was? If you say X was, absence of X was. What do you mean by absence of X was? You say Y was. If there was absence, there was no X, was there Y? Then refer to that. You cannot say Sunyamasi. That is the fundamental difference. So Sunyasya tu tad yuktam ubhayam vyahatattvataha. So you cannot say Sunya and Asit can be together. And we have discussed that at length. Okay. And then he's saying, na yuktaha tamasa suryo napi chaso tamomayaha. He's giving an example. You cannot bring together sunlight and darkness. Wherever there is sunlight, there cannot be darkness. Darkness will be there only when sunrise hasn't taken place. When sunrise takes place, darkness flushed out, there's no darkness. They cannot coexist. Similarly, easiness and absence, they cannot coexist. nothing, absence of ease and ease, how can they come together? Sat sunyayor virodhitvat sunyam asit katham vada. So sat and sunya. Sat means easiness. Sunya means absence. So yes, existence and absence, they cannot be brought together. That is the fundamental challenge the Advaita Vedantin makes vis-a-vis the Buddhist. Now we'll go to the next sloka, and therefore I'm trying to share that part. Ramakrishna Tiga. Okay. Now let's go to the verse number 34. Now, if the Buddhists will come up with more logical questions, and if he argues that, look here, the way you are arguing that Akasha and all these Panchabhutas are the Nama Rupas which are imagined in Brahman. Don't you argue like that? That everything is a projection in Brahman. Brahman is the fundamental reality. The rest of it is like snake in the rope. Like a snake is imagined in the rope, the details we see in samsara are essentially projections. And these projections do not have any fundamental validity. That is your argument. So, can I be permitted, my friend, therefore, to say, as a Buddhist, because I am obsessed with my idea about Sunya as a fundamental reality, that Nama Rupa is also imagined in Shunya? What is your problem? That is his question. And how the Vedanti answers or responds to it is there in the verse number 34. Biyadadir nama rupe maya yasu vikalpite sunyasya nama rupe cha tatha che jibyatam chiram. This is called a kind of mockery of the Buddhist argument. Very affectionate mockery. Biyad adehe nama rupe mayaya subikalpite chet. If the way, for example, is saying, Biyad is Akasha, Biyad adehe. So you can see, when you say Akasha, there are certain other material realities which per se do not have anything which you can access through your senses. Can you access space through your senses? We cannot. So the Nyayayika says that in fact you have to do a bit of anumana. You are hearing sound, and sound requires space to travel through. And therefore, we have to presume space exists. How do I hear something from a distance coming towards me? It has to travel in space. So obviously there is space. So there is a bit of anumana over there. But directly, can you see space? Can you see Akasha? We say, I see the blue sky. Yeah, but physics has proved, everybody knows that the sky has no color. It looks blue because of some deficiency in the way we look at it. And there are regions which are there in physics. We have studied that in school. So Akasha has no color as such of its own. It has no smell. And is there any water in it? No. So how do you actually sense it? You cannot sense it. So he's saying, Vyaradehe namarupe mayaya subikalpite. So with the power of this magical power of Maya, these are all imagined realities. If that is what you are trying to argue, as a Buddhist, permit me to say, Sunyasya namarupe cha tatha chet. Now, Buddhist is who is going to argue like this. Why can't you permit me also to argue that Nama and Rupa, Nama and the Swarupa and the qualities, the Dharma, both about the Akasha or the fundamental reality, whatever that I attribute, these Nama Rupa are also imagined, these are also projected on Shunya. What is your problem? The Vedanti smiles because the Buddhist is falling into his trap. So the Acharya Vidyaranya Muni here is saying, Jibyatam Chiram, you live long. I'm very happy that you are talking like this. Why? Whenever you agree to a sentence that Rama Rupa are imagined, whether you agree or not, you have agreed, whether you agree consciously or not. That's called a tacit consent. They cheat you, right? So, a lot of the cases that we see in the newspapers, in the media, I wasn't aware of it now, but you had gone for a dinner with that fellow and there was a business meeting. How can you say the business negotiation did not take place? Also, among men and women, among friends, all kinds of confusions. So there's a tacit consent. What is the tacit consent which is being imposed on the Buddhist? You are saying nama rupe dve kalpite. These are imagined, very happy. If you are having a kalpana, the kalpana can happen if there is something else on which this will be superimposed. There has to be something. For any imagination to be there has to be something, right? Therefore, if you say so, I'm very happy because then you are coming very close to the Vedantic standpoint. Number one, you are agreeing that there is called power of Maya because we have this theory of adhyasa, the Buddhist way of explaining how material reality appears the way it does, and the way the Vedanti explains why the phenomenal world appears is real, there are subtle philosophical differences. Because this Maya Sakti is attributed to God with his magical power, he manifests this reality and creation and all that. Buddhist doesn't accept any of these. Therefore, the Buddhist will never come into this game because then he'll fall into the trap of your storyline. He has his own storyline. He's not going to agree with you. Therefore, he's saying, if you at all are tempted to argue like me, that Nama Rupa can also be imagined in Shunya, happy with you. There are 2 points the Vedanta will score then. With what are the 2 points they will score? These 2 points are like this. The main point is, let's look at the I have just taken off the page, but nevertheless, the commentary states. He's saying, Vyadadehe iti tari शून्यस्यापि नामरूपे sadvastuni kalpite iti vatatah. Like, for example, the way the Brahman is sadvastu. Sadvastuni means in the sadvastu. Nama Rupa are kalpita, that is Vedantic view. Similarly, you want to argue that Nama Rupa are kalpita in Shunya. Badatah Bauddhasya apasiddhanta iti abhiprayana aha sunyasya iti. But this will be or apasiddhanta. Should you at all get trapped into arguing like this, my God, you are gone. Why so? You see, the arguments are like this. Very simply. Yadi sunyasya namarupe cha tatha ched. If you also argue that the vacuum can also have names and forms. If you talk like this, kalpana sambhavet ched tarhi asad bhavo na syad asat tada sat syad. See, if there is a rope, this argument is the fundamental argument of the Vedanti. If there is a rope, you can confuse that rope as a snake. If there is nothing, you can look into the sky and confuse that as a snake. What is the similarity? There has to be some similarity, right? There is nothing, you will see a human being. That's hallucination. That's not confusion. There is a girl who is walking and she has a hairstyle which resembles your niece or your daughter, and you take the name of your daughter and shout, Baby, where are you going? She turns back. I'm sorry, you resemble my daughter. No, she's not your daughter. Her hairstyle resembles, her t shirt resembles, her jacket resembles. So you confuse that girl who is walking in a crowd going to school with her friends, whether your daughter is moving around and how come she is there. That's your doubt. There is some similarity as a result of which. So you imagine your daughter in some other girl. Now, Nama Rupa Kalpana, you cannot do in Shunya because the moment you use the word Kalpana, the Vedanta is happy because they say you are arguing that there is to imagine that which is to be something else, that which is to be this samsara. That is what we Vedantis do. And you are ready to do that, then this is your opasiddhanta. You are confusing your own fundamental philosophy. You are not very clear. You are contradicting your main fundamental premise. And therefore, he's saying it's not possible. Okay, that is your Sunyavada will become, refuted. Therefore, the Vedanta is very happy and he's saying you live very long. Okay, because by at all using that language, you are in fact, without agreeing, subscribing to my school of thought. That is the argument. Now let's go to the next verse. There's nothing much in it. We'll go to the next verse. So I'm going to share again this page and you'll look at it. So verse number, so you just look at it. Tari sunyasyapi namarupe sadvastuni kalpite iti vadataha bodhasya apasiddhanta iti abhiprayanaha sunyasya iti sunyasya namarupe cha tatha che jivyatam chira. You live long. Now there is another question from the mind of the Buddhist student. ननु तरी शून्यस्य एव सद्वस्तुनः अपि नाम रूपे कल्पिते एव अंगीकर्तव्ये भवनमते वास्तवयोर नामनोपयोर अभावाद इति संकते. Now the Buddhist student has another round of doubt in his mind. What is his doubt? If you are saying ननुतरी शून्यस्य एव सद्वस्तुनः अपि नाम रूपे कल्पिते एव अंगीकर्तव्ये. If you are saying that only in sadvastu, that means what exactly really exists. Remember, when you say there is a jagat, there is part is not refuted as false. Jagat part is refuted as false. When you confused a little girl who has the hairstyle of your daughter who is walking ahead of you as my child, there is my daughter. There is no contradiction. There is, yeah, there is something. There is a human being, there's a girl. There is fine. My daughter is problematic, isn't it? There is a snake, but actually there is a rope. So the adhisthana is rope, the foundation, substratum, and the imagined reality is superimposed on it, which is your daughter, or it's a snake in a rope. And when you have the adhisthana jnana, when you confirm who the girl is, then your Brahma, that is my daughter, that nibriti happens. That is refuted. Anymore any anxiety. Is it my daughter going alone with someone? That anxiety is gone. The moment you confirm, she's somebody else's daughter and she's going with her dad. You are not bothered. She's going with the dad. If she's your daughter, then you have an anxiety. Who is this stranger who is taking my daughter and where is he taking my daughter to? You are anxious. That is the fundamental difference. So you have to have a adhisthana jnana, and Vedanta says when you have the Brahma jnana, adhisthana jnana, then this jagat doesn't frighten you anymore. It may continue to appear. Like, for example, once you know the sky has no color, however attractive and blue and beautiful it may appear on autumn morning, you are not bothered. You know that's not the color of the sky. So that is badhita vrittya. The sansara will continue to appear and you may have a few emotional ups and downs, but you know that these are fundamentally nothing real. There's nothing real about it. These are processes and they will happen. You cannot stop them. These are like waves on the ocean top. There's nothing real or unreal about it. The ocean is real. The waves, neither real nor unreal, they will appear and disappear. A lot of things in our lives appear and disappear. That is how the Vedanti slowly holds your hands and takes you towards wise equanimity. It doesn't mean that you'll become a complete stoic, but you are oriented towards that self-luminous truth consciousness. And that's what is referred to as liberation. That is the soteriology in the Vedantic parlance. Therefore, you're saying that the nanutari shunyasyeva sadvastunopi namarupe kalpite eva angikartabye, if that is what you accept, that namarupa is kalpita in sadvastu, bhavanmate vastavayor namarupayor abhavati sankate. He's saying, do you know, the Buddhist is also smart and he has a lot of logical arguments with him. You are saying that in Sat Vastu, Namarupa is Kalpita, my dear. Did you say? Now, yes, I said this. You're saying there is also Advaita Hani. How? Now, you see, you are saying Nama Rupa Kalpita, this Nama Rupa, two things you agree, and there is Sadvastu, Brahman. Nama Rupa and Brahman, how many are there? Three. Is there one? No, so actually there is also contradiction, right? Because you are saying Ekameva Advitiyam, then you are saying Nama and Rupa. What is the category Nama and Rupa? What is the epistemic standing? What is the epistemic status of these two words? What is the ontological status of these two words? Ontological means how do you look at them in reality? Where do they stand? What is the meaning of these two words? Is there any fundamental meaning? If so, the Vedanti has a beautiful answer to it. Absolutely only one Brahman exists, but in conversation, I'll be using your language. The talk every day will be using a lot of philosophical categories and logics and this and that, which might tempt you to believe that the details are real fundamentally, but they're fundamentally not real. But there is no other alternative but to talk using these philosophical categories, these technical categories for any logical argument to take place. Doesn't mean the ultimate truth is this. That is how he will answer. Now let's look at these arguments. Satopi nama rupe dve kalpite chettadavada kutriti niradhishtano na brahma kvachidikshate. The Vedanta comes around. When the Buddhists ask this question, he's saying, yeah, not a problem. I will happily explain to you all your doubts. What's your doubt? Sataha api nama rupe dve kalpite ched. Also, in case of truth, the name and form, nama rupa, dve kalpite, both are imagined. If that is so, then explain. Kutra, where are they kalpita? Because the Buddhist is trying to seduce the Vedanti into believing that actually your Brahman and everything is Sunya only. Vedanti is very clear about what he's saying. And therefore, he responds to the Buddhist saying, oh, really, I said it's all imagined. Yeah? This whole reality is an imaginary reality. Yes, my brother, I did say that. Where is it imagined? Kutra, where? Where is it imagined? Niradhishtano no brahmaha. Without adhisthana, there cannot be any Brahma. If there is a river, you can confuse that as Yamuna, even though that is Ganges. If there is a girl, you can confuse that girl to be your daughter or sister, your mother or friend or wife or whatever, whereas she is somebody else. If there's no one, who do you confuse her with? There has to be something. Brahma Jnana always presupposes existence of Adhisthana. Brahma means what in the Nyayika Bhasa? Tadvati tat prakaraka jnana, that is yathartha jnana. When X is there, if you have jnana of X, if there is a rose and you have rose jnana, right? There is a kamala, a lotus flower, and you have lotus jnana, knowledge of lotus, then you have yathartha jnana, valid knowledge. You are calling a lotus, you're calling a spade, a lotus, a lotus. But where actually there is a rose and you are calling it a lotus, that is Brahma Jnana. What is the Adhisthana? The Adhisthana is rose. What are you addressing it as? A lotus. Somebody corrects you. Sorry, that's not a lotus, that's a rose. So whenever the Adhisthana Jnana is accomplished by you, your faulty understanding that was a lotus is eliminated. So for any faulty knowledge to be presumed, there has to be a possibility of valid knowledge. Now here, just for the heck of a thought experiment. There's this great Buddhist philosopher called Karl Popper, and he wrote this made this famous argument called falsifiability thesis. He says, what is scientific truth? A scientific truth is one which can be falsifiable. So if you say, do you know Indra Vajrahasta Purandaraha? He is carrying a Vajra in his hands, supreme super atomum in his hands. You go and tell it to a scientist. What is he going to do? He'll just bypass you. He will not even respond to you. Why? That cannot be falsified. Vajrahasta Purandaraha. That is the Vedic statement. Will the scientist respond to this? He will not even come close to it. He will say nothing. What cannot be disproved cannot be valid knowledge. There has logical scope for that to refute it. So there has to be something. It has to be a refutable statement for it to be established. That is his falsifiability thesis. The Nyayika similarly says, for false knowledge to be there must be a possibility. It is essentially inverted falsifiability thesis. For something to be false, there must be something real. For something to be false, there must be something real. And if there's something real, you have no opportunity as a philosopher to say this is false. You have no opportunity to say this is a lie because you don't know the truth. There has to be something true, real, for you to declare something as false or a lie or as imaginary. Kutra iti nirad no brahmaha. Without adhisthana, there can be no faulty cognition, wrong cognition. Kvachide ikshate. Have you seen that? Give me an example. That is what the Siddhanti says. Okay. Having said that, I will be removing this part, and I will, of course, touch upon the Tika, because I saw that in the YouTube. Then the text comes and jumbles the whole thing, and our dialogue is not clearly visible. Therefore, I'm removing it. However, I'll be reading it, and I'll be sharing this book with all of you today, so that you can actually open it in your computer. You can also have a look at it. He's saying, Satopi nama rupe dve kalpe cheta tadavada. He's saying, Satopi ti. Vikalpa asahastvad ayam paksha eva anupapanna iti aviprayana pariharati. Vikalpa asahatvad. This is a philosophical jargon in Sanskrit. If you are trying to say this, that statement should be able to withstand different alternative interpretations. And if it is unable to withstand different alternative interpretations, then that paksha, that premise, that argument is weak. It cannot take down different kind of opposing arguments. What is the abhipraya? I am abhipraya. Sataha nama rupe king sati kalpite uta asati. Sat has nama and rupa, right? That is imagined in sat or asat. Sataha nama rupe dve, nama and rupa of sat, king sati kalpite, are they imagined in sat, uta asati, or in asat, athava jagati, or in jagat, na adyaha. You cannot say nama rupa are imagined in sat. Anyasya rajatadere nama rupayor anyatra suktikado aropa darsanat. Can you imagine gold in gold? Can you have Brahma Buddhi of gold in gold? Sukto Rajatakyana. You confuse a nakra as silver, walking on Puri sea beach. You see a nakra or a seashell is dazzling in a moonlit night, and you confuse whether that's a silver coin. What is that? It's a seashell. Can you confuse a silver coin as a silver coin? No. Why should you? You cannot. Number one. Then he's saying, because that is Sataha Nama Rupa Yoho Sati Eva Kalpana Ayogyat. And then the Nama Rupa of Sat cannot be imagined in Sat. There must be something else. Then you can say this is Kalpana. The Jagat The nama rupa, everything that you see in samsara, they are imagined, that is fine. You cannot trace them to their, you cannot say Jagat and then go back to the Brahman and they say they are all in Brahman as if they are all real. No, no. That is not how it is. These are superimposed. Na dvitiyaha asati. Asataha niratmakasya cha adhishtanatva ayogad. What doesn't have any substratum doesn't provide a platform for us to imagine any faulty alternative reality. If there's a dog, you confuse, maybe that's something else. There is no animal. How do you confuse that to be a dog or anything? Finally, na tritiyaha sataha utpannasya jagataha sannama rupa kalpanadhishtanatva anupapattihi iti anupapattehe iti. Sataha utpannasya jagataha. Jagat has emerged out of what? According to the Buddhists, the Jagat is just an appearance. There is no substratum. There is no foundation. There is no creator. Right? There is no adhisthana. But for Vedanti, the Jagat has come out of what? Sadeva Somya Idamagra Asid. It was Sat, out of which the Sansara has emerged. So if it has emerged out of Sat, then how can you say that this is all imagined? Nama Rupa is imagined. It's like you're imagining silver in silver. No. That is true. That is real. There's nothing imaginary about it. Mahabhuta adhishtanam anayoha kalpana ki na syat ityasankyaha niradhishtanasya iti. If you say Nini, Nam Rupa cannot be adhisthana. Okay, fine. Why don't you have Brahma Jnana? Then he's saying no. Nama Rupa to be imagined also, they has to have a adhisthana, they has to have a substratum. That is how he refutes them. There are different, interpretations of it. Okay. Here, there are other ways also to sort of explain them. If you have a rope, you can confuse that as a snake. If there is no rope, you cannot confuse any nama rupa kalpana is not possible as a rope or as a as a python or as a king cobra. No imagination. Okay, and the challenge for Buddhist from the Vedantic standpoint here is that asad rupe shunye brahma na drishyate yataha tatra na adhishtanam na satta matra. In your imagination, in your philosophical scheme of things, you are having one big, powerful ontological reality. Ontology means reality, metaphysical frame. So the big ontological item for you is that word called Shunya. And it's not Satta Rupa. If you say Satta Rupa, we are brothers. We have no problem. Brahma is Satta Rupa. You are saying Shunya is Satta Rupa, then we have no problem. We are brothers. You are saying it's not Satta Rupa. What is it? It's nothing. Then we have problem. Okay. Therefore, he's saying if it is so niradhisthane na brahmaha kvachid ichyate. That is what in the sloka it says. So there is a beautiful thing some other commentator has quoted from Brahma Sutra Bhashya 2.1.14. Sarpa drishtantena brahmana adhishtanatvam pratipadyate. Why the Vedanti all the time gives the example of sarpa? There's a snake. There is a joke about this Vedanta. One American came to India. That's a joke among Vedanta circles. And he studied Vedanta for 8 long years and he went back and then he was asked, what did you learn? What did you study in the Himalayas? He said, I was studying Vedanta. So what were you discussing? What is the subject matter? Can you tell us a little about it? And then the Western philosophers in the university said, but how can the snake enter the rope? Now, that is the problem. The snake cannot enter the rope, but it has entered. Therefore, the Indian philosophers are trying to drive it out. How can the snake enter the rope is what is the subject matter of adhyasa. The snake appears to be in the rope as a matter of superimposition. And then they do a lot of philosophical elaboration to prove that there is no snake. As such, there is no snake. The Vedanta, the Westerners said, yeah, but that's very easy for us to understand. Then you are liberated, no problem. Okay. So therefore he's saying, The whole conclusion is here that wherever there is no sattva, then there is no nama rupa kalpana. That is the final thing. So let's go to the next verse, and I'll again share. Can we? Yeah. So let me say the next verse. Ramakrishna Tika. Have a look at it. So 35 we have finished. We are going to the 36. Now first look at the philosophical context in which this particular argument is again initiated and concluded between the Vedantists and the Buddhists. Nanu asad eva idamagra asit, that is Chandogya Upanishad. इत्यत्र यथा व्याघात उक्तः तथा सदैव सौम्य इदमग्र आसीत् इत्यत्रापि दोष अस्ति इति संकते. Now Buddhist will say, okay, so you are saying Upanishadic insights are the foundation for all your arguments, and you are saying that the Sunya doesn't provide a platform for imagining Jagat. Jagat cannot be imagined. There has to be an adhisthana. Therefore, you want to anyhow persuade me to accept this Paramatma Tattva or Param Brahman or whatever. I don't want to do it. I have a question for you. And what is the question, sir? The question is like this: he's saying, Asadeva idamagra asit, because there are two consecutive statements. Asadeva sumya idamagra asit. Then he says, Sadeva sumya idamagra asit ekameva advitiyam. What was asad means what was avyakrita has become vyakrita. What was unmanifest has become manifest. What was, that was is not in question. The reality which wasn't visible has become visible. That is creation. Vacharambhano vikaranamadhiya mritika ityevam satyam. The clay has become a pot. Gold becomes a necklace. Necklace is not real. Gold is real. Brahman is real. Brahman looks like samsara. Like a gold lump of gold now appears like a beautiful ornament. But you cannot buy the ornament without buying gold. This is only name and form. The ornament part is only name and form. No fundamental existence. It's gold. Similarly, everything is Brahman. But we ascribe names and forms to it. In the pure consciousness, everything is Brahman. At a material level, we ascribe names and forms and make sense of our everyday lives. We have no problem with this. That is the Vedantic standpoint. The Buddhist has a question there. He's saying, Sadeva Somya Idamagra Asit is mentioned there. So, Sad Asit, there is some logical problem. And he will explain to you the logical problem in the Upanishadic insight. Let's look at it. Sadasit iti sabdartha भेदे वैगुण्यमापतेत अभेदे पुनरुक्ति स्यान् मैवं लोके तथेक्षणात्. See, the Buddhist has a problem, and that is answered by the Vedanti. This is our intellectual. If somebody says there was no dialogue, no discussion, no. Our spiritual, our philosophical tradition is only. A lot of people say it all started with Socratic dialogues. Now you know where it started. Long back. If you look at the Buddhists, you look at the Vedantic dialogues, they were all full of dialogues. In fact, this whole dialogical tradition went from here to the early Greek philosophers. Sad asit iti sabdartha vede. Sad and asit. Ram is a boy. Ram is a subject, is a boy, is a predicate. Right? So Ram word refers to one reality, which is a male child. Is a boy refers to that he is a student, he's 7 years of age, he goes to school, blah, blah, blah. These are all referring to different aspects of a reality. Isn't it? And in that particular sentence, each of them are not referring to one and the same thing. Rama is a boy. When I say Rama is referring to that vyakti, that individual, is refers to his existence, his continued existence. Boy refers to his gender. No? Sad asit iti sabdartha vede. Now the Buddhist is asking, if we say Sadeva Swamya idam agra asit, it was Sat. Okay, really? I'm getting a little confused, the Buddhist says. Sad asit. Sat existed. What do you mean by Sat was? It was true. Truth was. What do you mean by truth? Means it existed. It is like is. Therefore, he's saying, Avede punaruktisyan. These are the two problems he's raising. Sad asit. If you say Sad and Asit are referring to two different realities, Asit means it was. It was Sad. What is Sad? Sat means it existed. Asit means it was. It existed, it was. If you are saying that Sat is one reality and Asit is referring to continuation of a reality, then there is one reality called Sat and continuation of that reality is another reality. There are two realities. One is time dependent, the other one is just beyond time, is a Nitya thing, Sat. The other one is Asit. There is some Kala Bodha, there is some sense of time coming in there. So two realities, Advaita Hani. Vaigunyam apatet. Then there is a Vaigunya dosha, weakening of your position. Okay? Vaigunya dosha. Some people also say Dvaigunya in couple of tikas also there. Vaigunya dosam apatet. Abhede punarukti syad. If you say no, there is no difference in meaning of these words Sat and Asit. So Sat means it exists. Asit means it was. So it existed, it was. So that is repetition, tautological. Duality, you are repeating it. Then the Vedanti says, Ma evam, no, my boy, it's not like that. Loke tate kshanat, because this is how this, in fact, is experienced in everyday life. Really? It's experienced in everyday life? Show me the example. We'll go there. So, how is it? He has to explain, right? So, he's saying this Sad asit, tathahi sad asit, sabda vedayor artha vedo asti. Sabda veda. What are the two sabdas there? Sad asit, sat. It was, sat was. That's what he is saying. Sabda veda. There are two different words. Artha vedo asti. Meanings are different. Nava. Is it real or not? Asti ched. If you say this, Advaita Hanihi. Sat Asti. Two realities. Asti refers to one aspect of reality, one reality. Sat aspect refers to one reality. So, where is Advaita? Sadeva Swamya Idamagra Asit Ekam Eva Advitiyam. That is what you are saying. Sat Asit cannot be two different. Now you say, no, no, it's one. Nasti Chet. No, no, they are one only. Really? Punarukti dosha. Then why should you say Sadasti? It's one and the same thing. X is X. What do you mean by X is X? X is X. X is enough. You should only say X. What do you say? X is X. Ataha sadasit iti anupapannam iti dvitiyam pakshamadaya pariharati maimavati. This is a particular position of argument of the student that is presumed. That is a purvapaksha which is presumed by us. Then we will refute it. Punarukti doshasya ka parihara ityasankyaha loke iti. No, no, this is what you see in everyday life. That is how that is. And he will give that example. Okay? This is, whenever you look in any vakya, karta, kriya, karma, sambandha, it's always there. There is a subject and there is a verb and there is a predicate which includes an object and all kinds of things. Analysis of those who are into English language or into any language, they know that. Okay, so there is no tattva bheda in terms of exactly what they are referring to. This is a manner of speaking. That is what the Vedanti will say. Sad asi doesn't mean tattvataha. There are two tattvas. There are two sabdas, yes, but they are not two tattvas that there is one sat and there is one asti. That is not. So he's saying, because he's saying this is what is loka basana margena sadasit, because this is how people talk about it. How he's saying, and asit doesn't mean it's in past tense. That means it is not now. Brahman existed earlier, now it doesn't exist. No, no. There is no kala bodha. Okay, he's saying lokavasana shruti asit iti. This is in kalyana piyusha vakya. Lokavasana, because of this manner of speaking which makes sense to us, these are lokavasana. This is how we expect, this is how we talk. Like everyday life, if I say, what are you making? I'm making halwa. Oh, really? What are you making? I'm making rice pudding. You are making rice pudding. You are saying rice pudding. What do you mean by this? Is how we speak. Rice pudding will be made. It's not yet made. You are going to make rice pudding. So you are saying, I'm making rice pudding. Odanam pachate. Pachate. Odanam, the rice is being cooked. Ah, rice is already cooked. No, rice is being cooked. That's how we speak. Is lokavasana. Similarly, you are saying sadasit. Kalahi maikaha brahmani tasya asambhavat asit iti kevalam vyavahar upachara. When you say it was, the Sat existed, the Brahman existed, then it becomes the Avyakrita became Vyakrita, the unmanifest became manifest. These are manners of speaking. The Brahman is untouched by time. It's Desa Kala Vastu Paricheda Sunya. Therefore, that Asit word don't get too much worked up with that particular word. Okay. Now, before we bring it to a close, let's do one more shloka, which will give us an inkling of what kind of solution he's giving in the verse number. He's giving now this Loke evam videshu prayogeshu punaha ukti abhavaha kutra drishtaha ityasankhya aha. He's explaining, okay, give me a good example. He's giving an example. कर्तव्यं कुरुते वाक्यं ब्रूते धार्यस्य धारणम् इत्यादि वासनाविष्टं प्रत्यासि प्रत्यासि सदिति रणम. कर्तव्यम कुरुते वाक्यम. What is he doing? I'm doing my duty. What do you mean by duty? Duty means what you should do. I'm doing my duty. I'm doing my work. Work is done. So why do you say I'm doing work? I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. What do you mean by that? Kartavyam kurute. I'm doing my work. I'm doing my duty. Vakyam brute. What do you mean by vakya? Vakya is what is going to be said. What is said is called a vakya. Vakyam brute. He's speaking a sentence. Vakya means speaking. Then you are saying vakyam brute. Dharyasya dharanam. There is a load which you are carrying. Load means something you have to carry. So, dharyasya dharanam, these are linguistic examples of sentences which are not very logical, and yet, because of comfort in the minds of the people who use the language, these statements are often made in everyday life. They have nothing to do with the metaphysical reality about which we are having a conversation. The Upanishads are saying, Sadeva Swamidam Agrashit. Don't try to confuse the Brahman as if it's a reality like a pen or a pencil, and that you are making a statement about it. If you so do, you will be confused. Therefore, he's giving certain linguistic examples from everyday life. Ityadi vasana vishtam, because of our own vasana, because of our sanskaras and practices through which we communicate with each other. So, pratyasit sad iti iranam. Therefore, the person who is loaded with vasanas, for him to understand, that is for us. The Upanishad says Sadeva Somya idam agra asit. The Upanishad is targeting us as students when it makes that statements. Kartavyamiti Bhavatu evam loke shruto kim ayatam ityataha ityadi. So this is how we coming to close of our session today. And so this is the dialogue between the Vedantin and the Buddhist, which we will conclude it with more conclusive arguments and a little follow-up of this discussion. This philosophical argument, you just have to bear with it a little, because they are a little overloaded with what you call dry philosophical argumentation. But then as we proceed, you'll find a lot of juice in it. So I'll stop here. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om Tat Sat.